If a stranger ever seems to know too much about your routine, too much about your schedule, too much about when you're alone, don't ignore it. Pay attention to the little details, the things that seem too small to matter, because sometimes the person watching you isn't hiding in the shadows. Sometimes they've already been invited onto your property. Years later, Olivia still refuses to order food delivery after dark. She refuses to leave packages on her porch, and every time a notification says, "Your driver has arrived," and she remembers the photo, the hidden camera, and the delivery driver who knew exactly when she was home. This is Tales of the Dark, and this is the story of the delivery driver knew when I was home. I was 19 years old when I moved into my first apartment. It wasn't much. A small one-bedroom unit on the edge of town above a laundromat. The floors creaked, the plumbing rattled whenever someone showered, and the windows looked directly into a parking lot, but it was mine. After growing up with 3 younger siblings and sharing a bedroom my entire life, having my own place felt incredible. I worked evenings at a movie theater while attending community college during the day. Most nights I didn't get home until after midnight. That meant cooking was usually the last thing I wanted to do, so I ordered food, a lot, at least 3 or 4 times a week. Pizza, Chinese food, burgers, whatever was still delivering after 10. That's how I first met him, at least. That's how I think I first met him. The first delivery was completely normal. A guy in his mid-20s handed me a bag of food. He smiled, wished me a good night, then left. Nothing memorable. A week later he delivered again. Same guy, same smile, same friendly attitude. This time he joked about how many late-night orders I placed. I laughed, tipped him a little extra and forgot about it. Then he started showing up more often. Different restaurants, different apps, same driver. At first I thought it was coincidence. Maybe he worked for multiple delivery services. Maybe he was just always nearby. It didn't seem strange. Not yet. One Friday night I opened the door and he handed me a bag of tacos. Before leaving he smiled and said, "Long shift tonight." I blinked. Yeah, he nodded. You usually don't get home until after 11. Something about the comment felt off, not terrifying, just strange. I didn't remember telling him my schedule. Maybe I mentioned working nights before, maybe he was guessing. I brushed it off. The next week it happened again. He delivered Chinese food around midnight. As he handed me the bag, he glanced toward the parking lot. "Looks like you finally got that dent fixed." I froze. My car had been rear-ended 3 weeks earlier. The repair had been completed only 2 days before. I laughed awkwardly. Yeah. Then he left. I stood there holding my food, wondering why he would notice something like that. Still, I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal after all. He delivered to my building regularly. Maybe he had simply seen my car before. A month passed. Then the weird things started happening. Little things, tiny things, the kind of things that make you question your memory. One morning before class, I left a package from Amazon beside my front door. When I returned that afternoon, it was gone. I immediately assumed it had been stolen. Then I noticed it sitting neatly beside my welcome mat, not where I had left it, not tossed aside, not damaged, simply moved. I shrugged it off. A few days later, it happened again. This time it was a grocery delivery. The bags had somehow shifted from one side of the doorway to the other, almost as if someone had picked them up, then carefully set them back down. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe maintenance workers moved them. Maybe neighbors bumped into them. Maybe I was overthinking things. Then came the porch light. Every night before leaving for work, I turned it on. Every night when I returned, it was off. At first I blamed the bulb, then I replaced it. The problem continued. On, then off, again and again. I even started taking pictures before leaving, just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The photos proved I wasn't. The light was definitely being switched off while I was gone. I mentioned it to my brother during a phone call. He laughed. "You're paranoid. Someone keeps touching my stuff." "No, they don't. Something weird is happening. You work too much and sleep too little." I wanted to argue, but part of me wondered if he was right. I was exhausted all the time. Maybe I really was imagining things. Maybe stress was making me notice things that weren't actually there. Then something happened that I couldn't explain. I came home around 1:30 in the morning after a double shift. As I walked toward my apartment door, I noticed a takeout cup sitting beside the stairs. It was from a local coffee shop, a shop I visited almost every morning. The cup had my name written on it. Olivia. My stomach tightened. I picked it up. It was empty. There was no receipt, no date, no indication of how long it had been there. Just my name written in black marker. I threw it away immediately, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next evening I ordered pizza, and for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, the familiar driver showed up again. He handed me the box, smiled, then pointed toward the parking lot. Looks like they're finally paving that section. I looked over. Construction cones surrounded the far end of the lot. Work crews had arrived that morning. How would he know that unless he'd already been here? Again, that night I barely slept. Every sound from outside made me sit upright. Every car door, every footstep, every distant voice. Around 4 in the morning, I finally convinced myself I was being ridiculous. Nothing was happening. Nobody was watching me. Nobody cared about me enough to stalk me. The thought sounded absurd. For several days, everything seemed normal again. No moved packages, no strange coffee cups, no comments from the driver, nothing. I started relaxing, started feeling embarrassed about how paranoid I had become. Then I found something online, a safety video. A woman describing how she suspected someone was entering her apartment while she was away. She explained a simple trick. Place a tiny piece of tape somewhere nobody would notice. If the door opens, the tape falls. Simple, easy, effective. That night before leaving for work, I tore off a tiny strip of clear tape, barely larger than a fingernail. I placed it between the frame and the edge of my apartment door, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Then I locked up and left. The entire shift passed without incident. Around 2:15 in the morning, I returned home. The hallway was silent. The building was asleep. I walked toward my apartment, pulled out my keys, then stopped. The tape was gone, not hanging loose, not partially attached. Gone. My pulse instantly accelerated. I stared at the door, trying to think rationally. Maybe the tape had fallen off. Maybe it hadn't stuck properly. Maybe then I noticed something else. The doormat, it wasn't straight. I always kept it perfectly centered. Now it sat slightly crooked, only a few inches, but enough. Enough that I knew someone had been there, someone had touched it, and standing alone in that silent hallway at 2 o'clock in the morning. For the first time, I realized I wasn't imagining anything. Someone had entered my apartment, and they might still be inside. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I just stood there in the hallway staring at my apartment door. The crooked doormat, the missing tape, the overwhelming realization that somebody had been inside my home. Every instinct screamed at me not to open the door. I backed away. Pulled out my phone and called my brother. He answered on the 4th ring, half asleep, annoyed, until he heard my voice. 10 minutes later, he was driving across town toward my apartment. I waited in my car the entire time, doors locked, watching the entrance, watching the windows, watching for movement. When my brother finally arrived, we went upstairs together. He unlocked the door first, then stepped inside. The apartment looked completely normal, nothing overturned, nothing stolen, nothing damaged. The TV sat where it always sat. The couch looked untouched. The kitchen was clean. Everything appeared exactly the same, but something felt wrong. You know how a room can feel different even when nothing obvious has changed? That was the feeling. My brother searched every closet, every cabinet, under the bed, the bathroom, every inch of the apartment. Nobody was there. Eventually he sighed. See, I wasn't convinced. Something had happened. I knew it. The tape didn't remove itself. The doormat didn't move itself. Someone had been there. My brother stayed the night anyway. The next morning, he helped me buy a small indoor security camera, nothing fancy. Just a motion-activated camera that connected to my phone. We placed it on a bookshelf facing the front door, then I left for work. That night I checked the camera every hour. Nothing. The next day, nothing. The day after that, nothing. 4 days passed, still nothing. Gradually, I started feeling embarrassed again. Maybe my brother had been right all along. Maybe stress had gotten into my head. Maybe the tape really had fallen. Maybe then Friday happened. I was working a late shift when my phone vibrated. Motion detected. 11:47 p.m. My stomach immediately tightened. I opened the app. The clip was only 20 seconds long. At first nothing happened. The apartment sat empty, silent, dark. Then the front door slowly opened. My blood ran cold. Someone stepped inside, a man wearing a black hoodie, face hidden. He entered confidently, not like a burglar. Not like someone breaking in, like someone who belonged there, like someone who had done it before. The figure closed the door behind him, then walked directly toward the camera. My pulse exploded. The camera captured his face. Clear as day, the delivery driver, the same man, the same smile. The same person who kept delivering food. I nearly dropped my phone. The video continued. He stopped beneath the camera, looked directly into the lens, then smiled. A slow, wide, uncomfortable smile, as if he knew exactly where the camera was. As if he wanted me to know he'd found it. Then the video ended. I couldn't breathe. I immediately called the police. They dispatched officers to the apartment. I drove there as fast as I could. The entire drive felt unreal. The police arrived before me. When I got there, 2 officers were standing outside. One of them looked confused. The apartment was empty. No sign of forced entry, no suspect, nothing. I showed them the footage. The mood changed instantly. Now they were taking it seriously, very seriously. An officer asked me whether anyone else had a key. I said no, absolutely not. The locks had never been changed since I moved in, but only management had access. The police requested copies of maintenance records, interviewed the landlord, interviewed staff. Nobody admitted entering the apartment. Nobody recognized the delivery driver. The investigation started, and for a few days, nothing happened. Then I received another message. This time it wasn't Instagram, it was a text from an unknown number, only 3 words. Nice camera placement. I felt physically sick. The police traced the number. Burner phone, unregistered, impossible to track. I stopped sleeping, stopped ordering food, stopped staying alone whenever possible. My brother practically moved into my apartment. The camera footage became evidence. Detectives examined it frame by frame, and that's when they discovered something I had completely missed. The delivery driver wasn't carrying keys when he entered. He didn't unlock the door. The door was already unlocked. Someone had opened it before, someone with legitimate access. The police immediately focused on apartment staff, maintenance workers, management, cleaning crews, anyone with access, but nobody fit. Then another breakthrough happened. Detectives reviewed food delivery records, every order connected to the driver, every account, every delivery, every app, and that's when the story became truly disturbing. The driver didn't officially work for any delivery service. His profile existed, his photo existed, his vehicle existed, but the account information was fake. The identity belonged to a man who had died 6 years earlier. The driver's license, the documents, the records, all stolen. Whoever he really was, he wasn't supposed to exist. Police circulated his image. Nothing came back, no matches, no criminal history, nothing. It was as if the man had appeared out of nowhere and then disappeared. 2 weeks later, I moved out. I didn't wait for my lease to end. I didn't care about the penalties. I packed everything, loaded my car, and left. For the first time in months, I finally felt safe. Then came the final discovery, the thing that made everything worse. Months after moving, detectives contacted me one last time. A forensic examination of my apartment had uncovered something hidden inside an air vent above the hallway. A tiny wireless camera pointed directly at my front door. The battery had died weeks earlier, but technicians recovered portions of stored footage, enough to reveal the truth. The delivery driver hadn't started watching me after we met. He had already been watching me before our first conversation. The car wash encounter wasn't random. The food deliveries weren't coincidences. He had deliberately inserted himself into my routine, learning my schedule, tracking my movements, studying my habits, waiting, planning. The police never found him, not a name, not an address, not even another confirmed sighting, nothing. Years have passed since then. I live somewhere else now, a different city, a different life, but I still check every lock twice before bed. I still glance over my shoulder when food arrives, and whenever a delivery driver seems a little too friendly, a little too interested. I remember that smile because somewhere out there, the man who knew exactly when I was home was never caught. I wish the story ended when I moved out. I wish I could tell you the police never found him. And that was the last time I ever heard anything about the case, but that's not what happened. The truth is, the worst part came almost 8 months later. By then, I had started rebuilding my life. I transferred to a different apartment complex across town. A gated community, security cameras, keycard access, the kind of place that made me feel safe again. For the first few months, everything was normal. No strange messages, no unexplained sounds, no signs that anyone was watching me. Eventually, I stopped thinking about him every day. The police investigation had gone cold. The detective assigned to my case called occasionally with updates, but every update was the same. Nothing, no sightings, no identification, no leads. The man had simply vanished, and honestly, I wanted him to stay vanished. Then one afternoon in early spring, I received a phone call from the detective. The moment I heard his voice, my stomach dropped, because people don't call months later unless something happened. He asked if I could come down to the station. He wouldn't explain why. Just said they needed me to identify something. I arrived 30 minutes later. The detective led me into a small interview room. A laptop sat on the table. Beside it was a thick case file. The detective looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept much. He sat down across from me, then opened the laptop. "Olivia," he said, "we found another victim." The word victim made my chest tighten. He turned the screen toward me. A photograph appeared. A young woman, maybe 22, college age, dark hair, friendly smile. I didn't recognize her. The detective nodded. "You shouldn't." Then he clicked to the next image. My heart nearly stopped. It was security footage, a parking garage, the young woman walking toward her car, and behind her, the delivery driver, the same face, the same smile, the same man. I immediately felt sick. The detective explained that the woman had reported suspicious activity around her vehicle for several weeks. Items moved, doors unlocked, objects appearing where she didn't leave them, almost identical to what happened to me. She disappeared 3 months earlier. No trace, no body, nothing. My hands started shaking. The detective kept talking. Apparently, after reviewing hundreds of missing person reports across multiple states, investigators discovered a pattern. Young adults living alone, mostly women, mostly students, mostly people with predictable schedules. The same behaviors appeared again and again. Moved belongings, unlocked doors, anonymous messages, strange encounters. A growing sense that somebody was watching them. Most victims ignored it. Some reported it. Very few ever saw the person responsible. I was one of the lucky ones. Lucky. I hated that word because nothing about the situation felt lucky. Then the detective showed me something else. A recovered notebook, found inside an abandoned storage unit 2 states away. The storage unit had been rented under another stolen identity. Inside were dozens of photographs. Hundreds, actually, people sitting inside coffee shops, walking to class, getting groceries, living their lives, completely unaware they were being watched. The notebook contained names, addresses, schedules, notes, page after page after page. The detective flipped through scanned images, then stopped. My breath caught. There was a page with my name, my apartment address, my work schedule, my class schedule, the make and model of my car, everything. Written neatly in black ink, like I was some kind of project, some kind of assignment. Then I noticed something even worse. At the bottom of the page, beside my name, someone had written a single sentence, "Moved too soon." I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. The detective quietly closed the laptop. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Finally, I asked the question I'd been terrified to ask. "Did you catch him?" The detective looked down at the table, and I already knew the answer. No. Months turned into years. The investigation continued. Occasionally another lead surfaced. Occasionally another sighting appeared, but nothing ever stuck. The man always disappeared before police arrived, always. Eventually the story faded from headlines, people moved on, cases were reassigned, resources shifted elsewhere. Life continued. At least for everyone except the victims. Then, almost 2 years after I moved away, I received one final package, no return address, no postage stamp. Someone had physically placed it in my mailbox. Inside was a single photograph, nothing else, no note, no explanation, just a photograph. The picture showed my old apartment building, taken from across the street. At night, I stared at it for several seconds before noticing the date printed in the corner. The photograph had been taken 3 weeks earlier, long after I moved out, long after the building had new tenants. Long after the investigation supposedly went cold. I turned the photo over, my blood froze. Written on the back in black marker were 4 words, "Glad you're still safe." I immediately called the police. They took the photo, collected fingerprints, ran every test they could. Nothing, no prints. No DNA, nothing usable, just another dead end. That photograph was the last thing I ever received. No messages, no sightings, no packages, nothing. But sometimes that's what scares me most. The silence, because silence doesn't mean someone stopped watching. Sometimes it just means they're waiting. I still think about that first day at the car wash, that ordinary conversation, that friendly smile, that tiny moment that seemed completely harmless, because looking back now, I don't think he was checking my tire at all. I think he was checking me, and somewhere out there. The man who spent weeks sitting inside my car, learning my routine, studying my life, is still free, still watching someone, still smiling. And if you're ever convinced that somebody is paying a little too much attention to you, trust your instincts, because sometimes the people watching you are much closer than you think, and sometimes they've been there from the very beginning. If you are new here, subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare.